Call the meeting to order.
Good evening. Welcome to the council meeting of Monday, July 6th. The mayor is away for a little while this evening. Hopefully he'll be joining us soon. I'm Councillor Reid and I'm the acting mayor for this month. Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening we have a 19-item agenda. Items 1 through 6 are minutes. Items 7 and 8 are bylaws for final adoption, and items 9 through 18 in the agenda are staff reports. We also have one on-table item, which is also a staff report, which is item 19, and it relates to the rescheduling of the 2016 55-plus BC Games. Copies are available at the back, and council members have received a distributed copy. The first item on this evening's agenda is the minutes of the public hearing held on Monday, June 22nd. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item.
Item 2 is minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, June 22nd. Recommendation to approve.
Seconder. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 3 is minutes of the Tri-Cities Healthier Communities Partnership meeting held on Wednesday, May 27th. Recommendation to receive those minutes.
Seconder. Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 4 is minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, June 17th. Recommendation to receive.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 5 is minutes of the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, June 24th. Recommendation to receive.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I just want to draw council's attention to a couple of items that were in the report. Let's find the report here. Number 5. Okay, there were a couple of things. The committee was going to make a couple of recommendations to council, and instead I suggest that it was probably just best that they just itemize them in the minutes. But I just want to draw council's attention to a couple of things that part of the discussion of the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee. The committee does want to express that they have some concerns on the definition of open space and community and a complete community that's currently being discussed by BC Housing. So there was some discussion about that at the committee meeting. And the committee also raised concerns about the recent announcement for expansion at Royal Columbian Hospital of the Sherbrooke Centre, and in relationship to mental health funding here for Riverview, and felt that more should be done on the Riverview grounds in lieu of some of the discussions that's taking place around Royal Columbian. And the third item that they do want to express to council and also to BC Housing is the potential cost of renovations to existing buildings. As council recall, that one of the earlier phases of the Riverview consultation process was an evaluation of heritage values and some of the buildings, and the committee wants to make sure that before decisions are made about the buildings, that a full financial assessment is done on the viability of the buildings, and such as not just what the cost to bring the building up to standards for other uses would be, but also what the potential revenue could be from those buildings to offset some of those costs, and also what the cost of not doing anything could be, such as demolition and others. And so they've expressed that concern to BC Housing, and they just wanted me to share those thoughts with council as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Next item, item 6, is minutes of the Sports Council meeting held on Wednesday, June 24th. Recommendation to receive.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. This is an easy job so far.
Item 7 is fourth and final reading to see if Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4549. This pertains to 716 and 718 Morrison Avenue. Staff recommendations that council give fourth and final reading to see if Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4549.
All in favor? Moved. Sorry. Second. Councillor Zerillo.
It refers to development permit development variance permits, we're saying front setbacks, rear setbacks, and separation between the buildings. Could I get the numbers on that, please? What are the variances?
Your Worship, or Acting Madam Chair, this is being brought forward because there would be a development variance permit application which would in itself constitute sort of a mini public hearing. And procedurally we can get a little tripped up because the zoning bylaw has gone through public hearing. The public hearing is closed. Council is not supposed to receive any further information, new information regarding the application. So the development variance permit need was highlighted in the earlier staff reports. We had flagged that for council, so there wasn't any surprises. I can't remember the numbers offhand. They weren't substantial. I can get that information to council, but they were a meter or so, if that, in terms of the variances that are being sought. So what and this is between planning and development and the city clerk's department, we just want to make sure that procedurally we are sound with these sorts of applications so the rezoning can get considered by council in fairness, knowing full well that there is a development variance permit application, but that DVP that has to come forward separately have its own mini public hearing.
So I need to go back and revisit what those variances were, because this is in the Burquitlam, new Burquitlam low heat area, and we certainly can't be setting precedent by variances on the setbacks.
Mr. Gilbert.
Just to follow up on Mr. McIntyre's comments, there will be a subsequent staff report that outlines the variances, and it will come to a future meeting. So all of that information will come before council. The reason that this is happening now is that we cannot hold the mini public hearing, for lack of a better term, on the DVP while this bylaw remains at third reading, because it would possibly could lead to new information coming before council. So it's a two-step process now. The information about the variances, their specific detail, the distances will come forward in a new report in the near future.
But aren't we voting
if it's given fourth reading tonight for Councillor Zerillo, if she wants to vote against the development variance permit, she can at another time?
That is correct.
Yes.
There will be a subsequent second vote
whole
on
process
the
for the DVP.
So
the question before council tonight is land use. The question in the future is the building
Development
permit
variance permit.
and development permit required.
okay, so then can I just say on record that I'm going to want to see the variances for sure when it comes back, and I'm not necessarily, the land use seems fine, but I will want to see the.
This is fourth and final, so you should either vote for or against, whatever your wishes are.
Yeah, I just find myself without all the information I need.
Okay, we had a mover, a seconder, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 8, is fourth and final reading of the Colinet Street Local Area Service Bylaw number 4574. Staff recommendations that council give fourth and final reading to Colinet Street Local Area Service Bylaw number 4574.
Seconder? Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 9 is zoning amendment bylaw number 4570. This is for a proposed subdivision at 964 Charland Avenue. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4570, and that bylaw number 4570 be referred to public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Any questions? I knew there would be. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. I presume the access to these homes for parking and things like that will come off the lane, would come off the lane. And just going forward, don't need the answer tonight, but I drove down that lane a couple of days ago, and just to check the property out front and behind is the practice, I think, of many people on council when they're looking at studying proposed rezonings. And I found that lane quite, not only very narrow, but my first question has to do with who's responsible for weeds and plants that grow into the lane and make it almost impossible even for a guy with a small car to get through without scratching the side of his car with the branches of those leaves. Who's responsible for cutting those branches back? If it's the residents, how is that enforced? Is there an answer there? Madam Chair, do you know if anybody on city staff would have an answer to that?
I'm very sorry. Yes, Mr. Engineer. Sorry.
Through the chair, when we are dealing with vegetation in laneways, if the vegetation grows out of the private property or from the border of the private property, in other words, at the edge of the lane, we basically follow up on complaints, and there's a stepped process. We contact the property owner and we request the property owner to remove the vegetation that's narrowing down the lane, and we give a certain deadline to act upon it. And then we follow up, and if the property owner has not trimmed the vegetation back, then our crews will go trim the vegetation and send the bill to the property owner.
Now, this vegetation seemed to be on the outside of the person's back fence, between the back fence and the lane. Would that suggest that the vegetation is on city property, or is it usual that the property line goes right to the laneway and maybe the fence is?
Typically in these cases, we would apply the boulevard maintenance bylaw principles, where at the frontage of the property owner is responsible for the vegetation, and so the same process will.
So one way or the other. Well, I talked to the neighbor next door to this proposed house as well, and he was having problems with that vegetation as well. So can you consider that a complaint of some sort? Go and check it out?
Absolutely, we'll follow up.
Okay, and the second part of that lane is that it was a good coincidence that I actually bumped into that neighbor, because he opened his back gate for me and allowed me to back up and do a little T-turn to get out of the lane, because that particular lane has no roundabout at the end of it or anything like that. Is there anything as the development continues in this area that would see that a little roundabout at the end of the lane, not a roundabout, but a little turning area at the end of the lane being developed? I wonder if, because it's really, I would have had to otherwise back all the way down that lane to get out after going into it.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. And we, I'll arrange for staff to check with Joseph staff and transportation planning. But yeah, we have some challenges along that section of Blue Mountain, because Blue Mountain's to the west, of course, and there's the watercourse Nelson Creek on the east side. So there's a series of dead-end roads and lanes. In this instance here, to deal with just that issue that Councillor Neal's described, if the rezoning is supported by council as a condition of subdivision, they would be providing what we call a hammerhead, like a turnaround area on the property protected by a right-of-way that enable that turning movement until such time as may be possible with subsequent development of the properties at the far east end of the lane to get a proper dedication, then allow that lane to be connected back up to Charland.
I believe it's on page 3.
Right, and I missed it, and Councillor Hodge just pointed it out to me. Thank you very much. That answered the question. One other question. That same neighbor who's going to be next door to this development, if it goes ahead, was pointing out that of course, there was a big apartment complex across the street to the north from them, and as part of that, there's off Le Bleu, which goes north and south, and it's at the east end of the Charland there. There's you can be traveling south on Le Bleu and turn right west on Charland, but there's no way to go. If you're traveling east on Charland, no way to turn left and up north on Le Bleu, because it's just a very narrow little right turn only that's in place there. But the property owner says that absolutely everybody is cheating on that one, and there's lots of traffic going both directions. And I wonder if this has been brought to the attention of bylaw enforcement yet, or whatever, traffic control, that would take a look at this to make sure that this problem is being looked at. I don't know if anybody in staff was aware of it. If they hadn't been aware of it, can also consider this a notification. That's something that can be looked at to make sure that the laws that we've passed are being adhered to. Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thanks, Madam Chair. We will relay that information on to the bylaw enforcement staff for their follow-up.
Okay,
That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. In the next item, it talks about how the neighbor is consulted, or the proponent is consulted with their neighbors, and it doesn't mention anything about that in this report. And I just recall last time when this came to us, there was some opposition from some of the neighbors, and so I just was hoping that if planning hasn't already done that they could encourage the proponent to consult the neighbors before the public hearing and do the proper job. Thanks.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I believe the applicant was encouraged to do that. I don't know offhand what the results of that are, but we'll certainly have that request yet again.
Thanks.
Councillor Hodge.
Thank you. I had two questions. Councillor Wilson just asked the first one, which was about community consultation the second time here. The other question is have there been any changes? I wasn't able to find my old records of this. Is there anything that's different in this application? I know that a proponent can bring something back 6 months later. I'm just wondering if there's anything here that we should note that's different this time around. Other than that the apartment, I think, across the street is now closer to completion.
Yeah. Madam Chair, that's my understanding, but I will check again with staff. If there's anything materially different between this application and the previous one, we'll flag that for council.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Zerillo.
Yeah, thank you. I do remember when this one came the first time, and my objection was based on Le Bleu and the single direction traffic. So I am going to want to see maybe some number counts, like maybe somebody needs to go out there and see how many people are using it incorrectly, because that was my issue, was let's find out when this building comes in the Charland what the traffic flow looks like, if the people are going to obey the rules or not obey the rules. So I'm going to want to see some numbers in regards to that for the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Yes, thank you. Through to staff, one of the objections and comments in this wasn't so much about this development, it was about parking on Charland and the neighbors that are next to us using the boulevard as their private parking area, and people not being able to park there, and they're taking that as their private parking stalls along the street and eliminating the ability for street parking on the street for anybody because it's a public roadway. Has there anything been investigated by either our bylaws department or our planning department in regards, because it was an issue that was asked to be looked into at the conclusion of this item last time?
Mr. McIntyre. Oh, engineering, Mr. Gislason.
Through the chair, taking it over from Mr. McIntyre. Yes, indeed, we sharply recall the issue from last time around, and the information I received recently indicates that the multifamily unit construction on the north side is either completed or nearing completion, and the curb and gutter on the north side is now completed. So on the north side there is no parking issues. On the south side, the parking issue mentioned last time is still there, and as part of this particular application at the front of council tonight, engineering transportation planning is considering to make a requirement to the proponent to complete a design not only for the frontage of this property in question, but also for the adjacent 2 or 3 properties, so that the design will have a continuous curb on the south side of the roadway, which will effectively deal with the perpendicular parking issue. Now, we do recognize that with that, the number of parking stalls or space available for parking will be less than it is today, but in terms of pedestrian safety and general traffic safety, it's going to be an improvement. And we are looking at options how, once we have the design, the construction can take place.
Well, that's good to hear, because one of the biggest complaints was from one of the neighbors there not being able to park their car on a public street, and the owner of those properties were saying, this is private parking and nobody can park here. So that's one of the issues. I'm glad that had some action onto it. Thank you.
And a question for me through to engineering, or perhaps Mr. McIntyre. This will undoubtedly have a suite in it, so will we be making sure that we get a third parking spot on site and away from the apron of the garage?
Yes, Madam Chair, given the height and concern around parking and some of the challenges we've seen in some areas of Coquitlam, we're making a point now of advising the applicants. Like in this case here, it's a rezoning with a subdivision. Under that subdivision, if the rezoning is supported by council, you could have the primary residence and either a secondary suite, a carriage house, or a garden cottage. We're just making it very, very clear to them through the process. We don't have plans at this point in time, but if through their building permit process, they'll need to show the requisite number of parking stalls off-site and not meeting bylaw requirements.
I'm interested in the on-site. I'm not providing streets for developers to let their folks park on them. I'm providing them for transportation and visitors. So if they're going to have a suite, I want to see 3 parking spots on there. Thank you. Is there anything else? Nothing? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 10, please.
Next item, item 10, concerns zoning amendment bylaw number 4571. This is for a proposed subdivision at 940 Walls Avenue. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4571, and that bylaw number 4571 be referred to public hearing.
So moved.
Any questions? Councillor Zerillo?
This actually is in continuation of the statements that the chair just made. This is the same size lots as the one we just did, and it makes reference in the report that it will be a double-car garage with apron, and that will be considered the 3 cars. And I'm not sure how that's going to fly in the public hearing, because that's really just 2 spots, especially when the basement is no longer used available for storage. So I'm going to want to see some adequate parking if there's suites, not just a garage with the apron.
Okay, thank you. I think staff has heard you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 11 pertains to official community plan amendment bylaw number 4575 and bylaw number 4576. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam OCP amendment bylaw number 4575, first reading to City of Coquitlam OCP amendment bylaw number 4576, that in accordance with the Local Government Act, that council consider bylaws number 4575 and 4576 in conjunction with the City of Coquitlam 2015 5-year financial plan bylaw, which is 4545, and the Regional Solid Waste Management Plan. And that finally, that bylaws number 4575 and 4576 be referred to public hearing.
No questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 12, please.
Item 12 pertains to zoning amendment bylaw number 4532. This is for a proposed subdivision at 3561 Gislason Avenue. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4532, and that bylaw number 4532 be referred to public hearing.
I have a question. Again, parking. I do believe that you have been looking at the parking stalls, et cetera, for all of these town housing and the and homes up on Burke Mountain. I don't know how close we are to changing parking regulations, but again, I don't want to squeeze one more townhouse on and delete any parking for visitors and anything else. So just when it comes to public hearing, I hope you're prepared to answer that. That's all. Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. Well, this is interesting. This is pure forested green field at the moment and close to our Burke Village promenade type of space. And we all know that the transit referendum happened last week, and we're now really having to rethink transit. So I am interested to see what the proponent will bring forward, but I do want to let staff know that I will be looking at this through the eyes of no schools for a few years and no transit indefinitely. Thank you.
Okay, we had a mover, a seconder. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Item 13 is zoning amendment bylaw number 4572. This is for a proposed subdivision at 1411 Pipeline Road. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to see if Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4572 and the bylaw number 4572 be referred to public hearing.
So moved.
Again, parking, separate spot. Definitely these will have suites, so separate spot away from the apron. That's what it says. So, anyone else?
Yep.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. And I just wanted to confirm the attachment 3 shows those 3 lots, 2 of them with panhandle lots, panhandles that go out onto the future road. But that will be just one driveway there, I think it says in the report. I'm on the right one, aren't I? Yes.
Yeah.
And going to be very narrow. So just one driveway. So I just wanted to confirm that's not part of the rezoning per se, but that's just that's just the plan that they're going with. Is that right? And it could be changed?
You're through the chair. No, because the panhandle lots, they are a little unusual. They're not unknown of. They're unknown. But certain circumstances due to site constraints and configuration, and that sometimes it's really the only lot layout approach you can follow. So we want to make sure when we bring forward these type of reports with this type of layout that's heightened for council's attention. My understanding is that the 2 panhandle lots share a common driveway. But I will check with staff. Because I think this then also relates back to Councillor Reid's comment and concern around the parking. One of the efficiencies of a panhandle lot, if you will, is you could double up the use of the driveway, but then what's that do for parking access? So I think it's a fair question that we'll ask that they provide us more information by the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had was it's a really steep drop-off, it seems to me, from Pipeline Road going east. It's quite a steep drop-off there. And so I presume that all the appropriate pre-analysis has been done, but it just looked like it'd be very difficult to build on, especially 3 houses so closely together backing onto Pipeline there. But maybe some more detail about how that very steep drop-off is being handled would be something that we might want to talk about at the public hearing or something. Just some detail there, because it seems to be quite a difficult lot to build on.
Certainly, through the chair, some cross-sections showing the site. I generally recall that there is a drop-off from Pipeline down onto that property. Precisely how much, I don't know offhand, but maybe we can get a cross-section prepared for that.
Okay. Good, thank you. That's all my questions.
Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. In conjunction with Councillor Reid's questions with regards to parking, I note that the extension on El Camino is going to be done within a 15-meter right-of-way and only an 8.5-meter road width. How much narrower is that than the norm?
Through the chair, it's unique in the right-of-way width alone. The actual pavement width, we call the carriageway, the curb to curb, is the standard 8.5 meters. So there's no compromise there. So in terms of vehicle movement and parking, that's not being relaxed whatsoever. It's a narrow road standard we go to on, again, in tight and challenging sites, and go to a little bit narrower, more efficient right-of-way, and things may then fall off, such as a separate sidewalk. Sometimes shallow utilities need to be on private property, but at the end, though, the road carriageway is the same as the standard.
Okay, so standard road width, and we would foresee that at some point in the future, where on attachment 3 there's a section for future road that would connect with the pipeline frontage. Again, that would be your standard 8.5 meters, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So again, question just being for then the off-street parking. Again, these properties will be allowed to have suites, so I won't beat that horse. Because I think you're getting that message loud and clear. I do note that there is a DVP for bylaw setback, or zoning bylaw setbacks with regards from 7.6 down to 6.6 on the two lots on the southwest, correct?
Through the chair. No,
sorry, east of El Camino, sorry.
That's correct, yeah. That portion of the property is being pinched between the planned road extension through there and the watercourse SPIA, RER area to the east. So it's resulted in shallower lots, which then has an impact on the building envelopes.
So there were no other alignments that would prevent us having to ask for a DVP in a greenfield area?
The road alignment is it's a bit of a compromise there in climbing up the hill and then getting into alignment with the existing road to the north. With those two lots on the east side, I would suggest what you're maybe trading off or losing in terms of depth, you're gaining in width. So you've got a little shallower building envelope one way, but you got a much wider one the other way.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Just one question. It's a unique shaped lot, to say the least. I'm just looking at the piece that goes north. Is that's going to be future roadway? What will the status be of this road if this proposal goes through? Does that become city property until the owners to the north pay for it, or does this person who's doing the subdivision have to complete that section of road, or what sort of happens to the part that extends up past the neighboring properties?
Madam Chair, that's a really excellent question. You got me stumped. It's odd that it would show that road alignment to the north there as being dedicated as road at this time, and Councillor Hodge is correct. Usually with road dedications we want to see the construction, but I will have to check with staff on that, and if you wouldn't mind, we could
I just
cover that off in the public hearing brief.
That's something, so I'll just, at this point, we just get clarification as to how that will develop, because if the other homes are already in place, they won't, and it's very unique. I haven't seen one like this. Thank you.
Good point.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you. It's a compressed development of lots in there. My only concern is on the 3 lots in the Panhandle. You mentioned about pairing the driveways. I'm just concerned about the loss of all the street parking along there, and if we're going to have suites in there, I know, that's what I'm saying. There won't be any street parking there. So we're going to really need dedicated off-street parking stalls on this, because even they're just so tightly packed together there. You're losing that whole strip of all those 3 houses that normally could have had maybe some parking on the street there, or else there's a covenant on those 3 houses that they're not allowed to put suites in those houses. That might be something to consider to the developer there on that side of the street to deal with some of those concerns. Thank you.
Good point. Just through to Mr. Giuseppe, regarding the frontage road, the pipeline frontage road, I quite like that. I think it takes a lot of traffic off the main road where all the gravel trucks are turning and left-hand turns, etc., because the folks there could literally come right down and get onto El Camino to Robson where there's a light. And I like that very much. So I would interested in looking at what the future road is too and the timing of it. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Next item, item 14, is zoning amendment bylaw number 4573. This is for a proposed 4-story apartment building between 820 and 828 Gauthier Avenue. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4573, and the bylaw number 4573 be referred to public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Councillor Zerillo?
I have a question about garbage for the, if this goes through. I know of a similar development that recently completed with similar amount of units, and there seems to be some issues with the size of the garbage, recycling, organic, and one of the new things that's coming up is dog waste. And we know that this is right across the school from an elementary school, so there's a good chance there will be young families there with pets. So it's very hard to see on this small little document what the garbage area looks like, but I'd like to be sure to be able to see that there's adequate space for garbage, recycling, proper recycling, organic waste. One of the things that I've heard from a development similar to this is there's only one organic cart for this many units, and it's just the size of a residential cart. It's just not large enough. And the dog waste, we need to have a place for the dog waste because I guess it can smell quite bad after a week.
Hot summer day. Councillor Wilson?
Thanks. I just was looking at the makeup of the suites, and there's 43 one-bedroom, 19 two-bedroom, and 4 three-bedroom. And I'm just thinking, this is not really on a great transit route. It's right across the street from a school. It seems to me the ideal place for there to be families living in it, and just seems like most of the suites are not suitable for families. And so I'm just wondering, is there anything that we can do to try to encourage the developer to include more two-bedroom and three-bedroom units?
Mr. McIntyre?
Fair question.
Great family area.
Yeah, no, I granted the school is right across the street there. I think as council is aware, we don't, within our zoning bylaws, specify a certain number or breakdown of 1 or 2 or 3 bedroom units. We've been looking at that a little bit through the draft housing affordability strategy. We haven't got very far with that. What we've been doing is it's sort of on a project-by-project basis, and through the discussions with the applicant and how they view the site and staff's feedback and what our thoughts are for the neighborhood and the area. But at the end of the day, it's the developer's choice of what he feels will, as an overall package, that he can market for that location in that type of unit mix. So I can make note of it, and we can ask them to give some thought to that, so they can perhaps speak to that at the public hearing when they are here to present their proposal. But at this point in time, we don't really have leverage in terms of specifying a certain unit size over another.
Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Actually, I've made a similar note to Councillor Wilson on this one. It's a note that really 6% of the units are 3-bedroom, and again, this seems to be a great area for family. In conjunction with this, there is a variance request on the width or building length of an extra 8.61 meters. So to your point that there's not a leverage in the discussions, there might be 8.61 meters worth of leverage to have discussion. And just say, is there a market for it? It may be a good point. In the discussion analysis, it speaks to the Mayardville Neighborhood Plan guiding principles that it meets. Are there any Mayardville Neighborhood Plan guidelines that this proposal would contradict that we should be aware of?
Through the chair, not offhand that I'm aware of, because we would typically want to flag those in the report to give council the full balanced reporting, if you will. It's again a question I can take back to the file manager and just ask again, but I don't believe so. But we will check.
Just in preparation for first hearing, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, I also would put my 2 cents in for larger suites, because this is a family area. It's a great area for families. So by reducing the number of, he's got 19 2-bedrooms, he could reduce that down and add a few more 3s, and I think his marketing would be fabulous because there aren't any out there to find. So, Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I'm just going to echo what 2 other councillors already said. I made the same note given the neighborhood and the placement to the school and everything, I don't think that 4 out of the 66 suites being 3-bedroom and only 19 out of the 66 being 2-bedroom is I think we could ask for more. Larger suites. Encourage more, yes.
Okay, no more questions. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Item 15 is a proposed policy for cultural displays in City Hall. Staff recommendations that Council adopt the cultural displays in City Hall policy as outlined in the report.
So moved.
Questions? None? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Next item, item 16, is management of rodent issues. Staff recommendations that Council direct staff to add a requirement to the demolition permit process to require the owner of a building to be demolished, to have a qualified structural pest control professional inspect and exterminate any rodents found in the building and on the property prior to the issuance of a building demolition permit.
Do I have a mover?
Second.
Second? And a whole bunch of questions, including me. Councillor Zerillo?
Well, I just want to thank staff for this report. I know that it is an issue in South Coquitlam for sure, and with all of the soil being overturned. So I think this is a great start. And my only question would be vacant properties that are set for demolition but haven't got a demolition permit. Is there something we can do on the vacant properties? Because that also gives time for breeding.
Okay, Mr. Giosecki?
Through your worship, I believe we can. We can follow up on a complaints basis, and we, I believe, have the tools to request the property owner to engage a professional and carry out the necessary steps to eliminate the rodent problem.
Thank you. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how this will have impact. Thank you.
We'll bring all the cats in. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. A question with regards to timeline typically between the issuance of the demolition permit and the work actually being undertaken. Is there a standard that we normally see? Is it the permit is issued and then the work starts the following day, or is there some lag time?
I believe that the process includes obviously applying for a demolition permit, and certain conditions must be met before we would issue the demolition permit. The anticipation is that with this recommended step in the process, the rodents issue would be resolved prior to or at the time the permit is actually issued. Now, it might take a couple of weeks to deal with the practicalities of the rodent issue itself, but because other conditions have to be met, I don't see this as a delay in the process. And I think before that checkmark is done and the permits department that the rodent issue has been resolved and it's certified, the probability of issuing a permit and still having the problem is minimized.
Okay, I appreciate that. I really commend you for bringing this forward, because I think it is a significant issue. The skeptic in me wonders whether an individual could go address the rodent issue, but then not apply for the demolition permit for a period of several months, and the issue reappears prior to the demolition. So is there any provisions that we could have in place to ensure that there's a relatively tight timeline from the, pardon the pun, the execution of the services and the actual issuance of the demolition permit? Or do we just let the cats out in the neighborhood?
No.
Well, I do believe that. Well, there are circumstances you simply cannot design for.
Yeah.
But should we come across this kind of a problem, I think we'll find a solution very quickly.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
Well, thank you for bringing this forward. This is an issue that we've discussed on several occasions, and including following the election in the fall, where I had a chance to talk to some of the homeowners in this area, and it was actually at that time that I had actually two separate homeowners identify the concerns about demolition, and that was possibly leading to an increase in rodents sort of fleeing and finding other locations. It's interesting that the report here, which I think is very good and identifies not only some of the complaints, but also the relationship with demolition areas. And I think in one of the areas where certainly I heard about it, I only see one complaint, and I heard more. So I suspect that we're not getting all the complaints. So this will certainly be welcome news in that neighborhood in the South Austin area. So I'm pleased to see that this has come forward. I hope that it's going to make a difference if it, in fact, it goes through. But more importantly, I think that, as Councillor Zarrillo and Councillor Morrison also mentioned, is that we have to also look at what we can do on interim measures, because this kicks in when the demolition permit takes place. But we do know that we have a number of properties that are sitting waiting for redevelopment, and those are becoming an issue as we wait. So this is a great first step, but I think we still have some more work to do. But I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm taking my turn now before they keep going. They're going like mad here, like little rats. So I guess this isn't the first time in 24 years that I've been around that we've had rodents and pest problems. And of course we used to have a vector process and a control program, but it was with Port Moody and Port Coquitlam. And not all of the rats are coming out of just houses that have been demolished. I mean, we have, as soon as the vector program went, they must have put a sign out, come to Coquitlam, there's nobody chasing us anymore, because I hear from people that live by Coquitlam River, for instance, down in the Hockaday area, they've got a run over of them too. So I have two questions that I'd like to bring back at the next meeting. Is there any way that perhaps Drake Stevens and his department can speak with Port Moody, Port Coquitlam? How much did the program we used to have cost? And would there be perhaps a program that the Tri-Cities could get in together? The rats don't know the boundaries, so I'm sure they're running up and down the creeks and up and down the trails. And I'm wondering if there might be some savings for all of us if we do look at a vector control program. We've got unprecedented growth in all three cities right now, so I think it might be something that's worth looking at. And I don't know who wants to say anything, so I'll move on to Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I'm really happy to see this report as well. I'm in full support of the requirement to get this with the demolition permit. An email that we received, I don't really feel like the surrounding residents should have to suffer a financial hit trying to kill the rats running around the property. And the report said that proportionate to other cities, Coquitlam, the rat problem, the vermin problem is the same, but based on the door knocking during the campaign last year and just hearing from different residents, I think it's maybe gone up in certain parts of the city, i.e. the southwest, where a lot of the demolitions are happening. So I'm happy to hear about this, but I'm also wondering if there could be a sign that goes up on the fence, just letting the residents know that the problem's been dealt with. I don't know, that just might be something to let the surrounding, because there's a couple of houses on my street that are halfway through being demoed, and there's issues. And so it might make the residents feel better when they're out for a walk that they see a sign or something posted. But I was out for a run this weekend, and I was running around Lafarge Lake, and within 4 or 5 meters of the big sign that says, "Do not feed the birds, excess food attracts vermin," I saw a black garbage bag filled with bread on the shore of Lafarge Lake, and it was ripped open, and there was bread everywhere, and it was in the lake, and loaves of it. So I think it was probably a well-meaning resident or a well-meaning food bank volunteer or grocery store volunteer, I don't know, thinking that they were doing a good thing. But I'm happy to see more education and maybe enforcement regarding this. I've been to a lot of festivals and public events lately, and our environmental services team is doing a fantastic job in outreach, talking about wildlife and green initiatives and whatnot, and I think we have to keep that going with education of our residents. But anyways, I'm in full support of this. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is a good thing to be added to the demolition permit. I want to highlight, though, that I don't think this is the big cause of rats in neighborhoods. It's part of an issue. When you get into the report and you read the report, that to effectively reduce rodent population, we advise that residents' behavior towards controlling food sources, harborage would need to improve, and the intensity of the use of integrated pest management. So a lot of the issues are in the neighborhoods themselves. Cat food, pests, food that's out there right now where there's composting. Some people have little illegal chicken coops in the back. These are some of the factors that create the rat population. The houses are a shelter place for them to go. There's a lot of it's abandoned. There isn't really food source. It's a place of shelter. But the problem with the rat population goes throughout the whole community. So I think the next part about this, the important part, is education to our neighborhood. And I think it's important. I like the program where it was. We were spending $100,000 or more plus to Port Coquitlam on this, and we weren't getting that value back. And staff did a full report on it. And I think by putting the onus back on the property owners and the owners to pay for this makes them more responsible for looking after their own garbage and waste and everything in the neighborhoods. I think that's the important part about this is the education, and I think through our staff and doing that outreach in those areas to where the problems are about controlling those food sources. If we don't control the food sources, the rat population will continue to grow. It's not as bad as in other areas, and it's probably, as Councillor Towner pointed out, in some areas it's a little worse than areas. And why is that? There's probably a certain problem with food source areas in that area. So that's the part I think is about the best part. It's great to have this added to the demolition permit to go through it. And I think for any buildings up that when staff are talking with developers and planning, if they're looking at those buildings to do some pre-education on them, to do some rat control, I think it's meant, or if they're abandoned earlier, to put some protection, some work into that before it comes down. And I think we can do that when we discuss them through the planning department and put those things in their head to do that. But education, I think, for all our residents is the best thing on the food source. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. And I'm thinking along some of the same subjects that Councillor Asmussen's mentioning, the other problems with rats, not just dealing with the demolition, and just about everything we would want to do in order to control the rat problem would cost some sort of money, even simple education, the enforcement, full vector control problem. So I've been thinking about how to do this without a big budgetary impact, and I thought, well, aren't rats an invasive species? I think the most common sort of rat that we have in British Columbia around our homes has actually been introduced via European settlement 200 years ago, 150 years ago. And there are provincial funds, I know, that are available to combat invasive species. So if I'm correct, maybe we could tap into some of that money to have an education program or some sort of vector control officer or something like that, and that would be an impact that would be shared across the province rather than just all on our beleaguered property taxpayers. So if I'm correct that the most common rat problem is the Norwegian rat or the brown rat or the wharf rat, all names of the same species, that is an invasive species as far as I'm concerned, and therefore there might be a possibility of getting some support from Victoria on that. So just an idea for the General Manager of Engineering and Public Works there.
I love it, but I think invasive species come with roots, not legs.
No, there are invasive species with 2 legs and 4 legs and probably more legs than that, and roots.
Okay, everybody's had their say. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Next item, item 17, pertains to Mundy Park Fieldhouse replacement. This is preliminary design work. Staff recommendations that Council endorse the proposed building plan, rendering and specification outline for the new Mundy Park Fieldhouse as outlined in the report. And 2, that staff be directed to proceed with the working design drawings, tender, and construction of the Mundy Park Fieldhouse project.
Councillor Asmundson.
Well, I like the changes to the design. I think it's a lot better than what we had last time. I'm going to support it. When I read the report, and I still look at a $1.4 million budget for a 2,600 square foot building, and I look at, we're building brand new 4,800 square foot houses at $1.5 million selling them with the land cost of $500,000 or more. We have no land costs here, and those houses have all the top-end bells and whistles, expensive stuff in them, and we're building 2,600, and I'm glad it's a basic square concrete structure, but when I have a hard time, I think the average Joe public has a hard time wrapping our heads around the cost of civic buildings, and I like the design and everything, I just have a hard time with the cost on this, and I just had to highlight that. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's a great design. I think it'll fit in great at the park, and I like the look and the layout. My question is, would this layout be able to accommodate either a preschool or a child care facility? The way there's the number of interior washrooms and kitchen facility, storage, that sort of thing.
Through the chair, if I can answer the question, the scope of the project, as originally directed by council, I think it was the one-story building. The way this space is proposed does allow the use for as both for city rentals for a number of programming purposes, as well as a non-licensed childcare facility of various types, as we do today, Victoria Hall, etc., including Scout Hall. There's options there. When it comes to an actual licensed facility, now that would be an occupancy that is beyond the scope of this current design. When we did report out to council, we did caution that was not in the scope of this original design. And the current layout would accommodate a rental for a childcare use of various forms, non-licensed. But when it comes to licensing, and that would be a different type of occupancy, and it would add a fair amount of cost to that. Now, I would caution with a rental. So there's a multi-purpose space that is divisible into two spaces. You'll see there's a dividing curtain. When, in our experience, even with non-licensed childcare, when there's a regular rental, typically it's more challenging to program the space for a variety of uses, because that tenancy typically happens on a Monday to Friday for 7 or 8 months of the year. So when it comes to a rental for a childcare, an ongoing regular childcare usage, it's more challenging because they have furniture, right? They have all the little kids' tables, etc. So if that were to be one of the occupancies, we would have to be cautious that rental would have to be able to move that furniture in and out on a daily basis if we were going to program that space for a different purpose, for say city programming in the evening. So there's some options, but I would caution that, number one, it's not designed to an occupancy for a licensed childcare, which is a higher amount of code requirements. And secondly, that for a childcare rental, it does limit some of our city programming options. It's still an option, but it would be a little bit more care to manage those occupancies and to allow them to work in a complementary way.
I'm just not sure why we would want to give up that kind of ongoing revenue when we have that opportunity.
Through the chair, we do want to have regular revenue. There's no question that's an important component for the buildings we operate. It's also a question of programming. So you always try to put a balance in place. So it would be an option that we could take advantage of. But again, if there's an occupancy that actually prevents us from renting out that space for the evening, then that is a loss in terms of programming as well. So we just always have to balance that with the offerings to the public in terms of overall programming. There's things that we talked about in the past with recreational programming that we do here that can be expanded. There's also nature type of programming that we have said would also be very useful. There's also private rentals that might occur in seasonal periods. So we always want to have a flexibility, but we look at the best balance of both.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, it can all be incorporated through functional design, right? And the way this is designed, it's not going to incorporate that opportunity. So I just get frustrated. This has been rushed because we're trying to get it done in time for the 55-plus games, and I think sometimes we make our decisions. When we make our decisions based on those kinds of timelines, I think sometimes our decisions might be short-sighted. So it's a great spot for a preschool or a child care facility. I'm not saying the city would run it. Obviously, it would just be, we would contract a child care provider to run it, and I think it would be a huge amenity to the community and ongoing revenue to the city, and it's frustrating that it's not going to happen. But that's just my opinion. I didn't get enough support last time, so I'm just venting right now.
Oh, my.
I'm done venting, yes, thank you.
This has gone out.
So Councillor O'Neill is next.
Councillor O'Neill, sorry, this is
Thank you very much.
died.
It looks like an extremely well-designed and built building, the sort of place you'd want to take refuge in a 9-point Richter scale earthquake, I think. And for $1.44 million, I certainly hope that it lives up to that, the appearance. The specific question I have is for $1.44 million. Do we get rain gutters and downspouts on here?
They're extra.
It's not shown on this fairly detailed attachment 3 drawing. Have they been left off the drawing for aesthetic reasons, or will they be coming on? Does anybody know?
Aren't included either.
How about gutters and downspouts? Are we getting that? Anybody know?
Through your worship, we are getting gutters and downspouts for that cost.
Good. That's good. We don't have to pay extra.
No extra.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hodge.
I had the same thoughts as Councillor Wilson. I'd really like to see our facilities used more during the day, particularly when they're in parks and right next to where we have parking there, we have a playground there, and that was why when we first began this discussion, I thought it would be great to have an upper floor where we could have that daycare or something. Because I agree with you. I'm a user of one of our facilities on a regular basis that does have a daycare in it, and it is a real challenge having a user share with a daycare, that they really do need to have a more permanent space than for setup. They just can't set up and take down in half an hour. So I wish that we could have done something to accommodate something on more of a permanent basis. But when we saw the price tag of doing something like that, we think 1.4 for this facility was it 1.4? I just lost it. Yeah, for this, we could have built 2 buildings for what it would have cost to add that extra floor, and I really wish we could have done that, but we can't. So this design, in terms of a recreation facility, I think is really good. I'm assuming that the wall, when it's divided in 2, that those actually can be used as change rooms for a sporting activity. The idea is that they're change rooms on a weekend when they're not needed, the walls open to make a big room. Is that sort of one of the options for this room? Because I see they have the doors on either side. Can they be used would they be used like by a baseball team as the team, or dressing rooms, I guess is a better. Yeah.
Through your worship, through the chair, this is still at the conceptual stage. The storage is not showing a dividing wall there. The idea behind the storage facility is that there will be a dividing wall there where if each multi-purpose room is being used independent of each other, they will have their separate storage available to them for chairs and tables and other storage items and that sort of thing. We did not design that storage room to accommodate a change room or any... No,
I meant the multi-purpose room, the idea that the multi-purpose room divides in half. Is that the idea that during tournaments that they would, and then we would just bring in portable bleacher benches or something? Is that
one of the options for the multi-purpose room? The division of that is one of the rooms during a tournament can be used for the sports teams, and the other could be used for the referees. There's a multitude of uses. We're going to leave that up to the sports groups to determine what's best for them.
Right, and washrooms are accessible from outside, and it looks like we did leave the window into the kitchen so that it can serve as a concession. I know that was one of the big things that we heard at Sports Council, is the ability to still be able to serve food across through a window. So, okay, no, that looks good. Thank you.
Mr. Marsden?
Thank you. Just your last comment about using the rooms for referees, and that 20-plus years in sports would indicate to me that we typically don't take care of the officials. So I'm sure it'd be like tournament officials would use one and players would use the other, and the referees would change in the parking lot. That's probably what would happen.
Fair to me.
In looking at this, I appreciate what we're trying to achieve, and Councillor Wilson's questions. I look at the washroom facilities that we've got here, and it's about 345 square feet, and we've got DCC money of $440,000 to achieve that. Recently at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities events, went through a trade show, and there's a company that provides they're not really portable structures. They are quite permanent, but they are graffiti proof. They are self-cleaning. They are high-tech. They are everything you could possibly want, and the price point seemed relatively attractive. So I would encourage us to take a look in conjunction with this, is perhaps we look at that as an option for the provision of the washroom facilities, and would probably free up an additional 345 square feet of usable space for our multi-purpose rooms without increasing the budget. So we could really get an extra 25% increase in the multi-purpose room space for the same dollar. So just if I can look up the contact information for the company from FCM if you wish. I believe our city clerk, who was absolutely spectacular in Edmonton, I believe he has that information.
Thank you, Mr. Allaway.
Thank you.
If I could just make a comment, we did actually get quite a bit of information from council members and the city clerk on, and we are looking at some of the bathroom options, particularly the ones that can replace what currently is being done in a portable basis, for instance, and areas that are not serviced by services, for instance, that can really help us. And many of these are self-cleaning, they're self-operating, and there's a variety of types. So we're looking at them, particularly in areas that are not serviceable. So that's important. In terms of their cost and their utility, from our perspective, I think in the previous report we raised the issue of bathrooms in Mundy. Mundy is our prime park. It really does mandate a permanent building structure. Some of those that we saw that are single units for the portable types, the new types, when you think about having 4, because this is 4 per gender, so it's actually quite a fairly cost-effective enterprise to have 4 per gender in this building, and we believe a permanent structure here is suitable. I get where you're going in terms of the efficiency of space, but we're looking, for instance, at the Eagle Ridge, Eagle Mountain, where we want to have maybe a bathroom up at the top, perhaps for the Crunch, Queenston, those type of locations. We are looking at some of these structures, even in locations where there's a spray park that might need a temporary bathroom. In locations like this, our main concern in Mundy was the bathrooms and the amount of use they get here and how bad they are. And so from our perspective, our recommendation would be that we stick with a permanent bathroom, bricks and mortar in this case. But we certainly are finding there's going to be applications for these permanent types in various locations. We'll pursue those. But this was the biggest concern from the public, was the number of bathrooms we need here and their utility.
And I appreciate that. What we saw on display certainly was not temporary. It required services. They required to be fully plumbed. They required all that. It just had a great deal of flexibility in its design guideline to fit into a space. And I just suggested as something to investigate in that it can deliver what we're trying to achieve. I absolutely agree. We've got to make sure that the washroom facilities are sufficient. We've got to do that. I just, from what I saw there, quite an impressive look that they had. And again, the low maintenance low operating costs was very attractive. And again, if we can couple that with the fact that we can increase our programmable space within here, I think it's a win all the way around. So just encourage us to take a look at it through the process. Thank you.
Mr. Alahueva, do you have all the brochures?
I collected the brochures from the display booth that Councillor Marsden is referencing and
Maybe
made
the
them
rest of
available.
us could take a look at them. It sounds interesting, if not for this space, other spaces.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Zerillo?
Thank you. And I thank Councillor Wilson for reminding us about how important it is to have daycare facilities. And unfortunately, we were priced out on this one, but perhaps as we start looking at amenity rooms in stratas, we could think about that just for our development side, that perhaps there's opportunity in the city too, but it is unfortunate that we got priced out on this one. Arts groups, youth groups, and SD43, I want to make sure that we keep an open mind. I know we can't have daycare, but certainly there would be arts groups that would probably love to practice in these facilities, and I'd like to make sure they get an equitable chance to rent it out. Thank you.
Councillor Towner.
Oh, thank you. I'm very glad to see there's a kitchen. I don't remember how long ago, but I think one of the initial designs that came out, there was no kitchen. I wasn't on council, but I was on the sports council, and I've lived many a weekend in that park for ball tournaments, and having a kitchen so there can be a concession stand is not only convenient for users of the park, it enhances people who have come we hosted the provincials just last weekend, so people that have come all the way from Prince George or Cranbrook, it's just good to have food on site, so I'm very happy about that. And although I do agree with Councillor Marsden about those washrooms that we saw at FCM, but I tell you, the improvement going to 4 toilets in here for females, we take longer to go to the bathroom, and in between games at a softball tournament, this is going to be an amazing improvement. And I also just want to give kudos to some of the other design. Being a mom and spending hours in that playground, excuse me, and not being able to see the entrance to the bathrooms when your kids are little, so you can take both of them and go together. This is a good design. So I just want to give kudos to that. Also to staff for their efforts in minimizing the impact on the trees. So I appreciate that. So, and I'm just curious, is it as expensive as it is because of the vandalism? You know how you're in town center bathrooms or MAC and it feels like you're in jail, the clunking because of the stainless steel? Are those the kind of bathrooms we're getting? And is that what adds to the cost? So there's vandalism proof?
Okay. Who will answer that?
Through the chair, yes, that's quite correct.
Okay.
We kind of were well aware that you've all expressed concerns about the cost of these buildings, so we did kind of split the budget into 2 halves, and the washroom component is considerably more expensive than the multi-purpose space part of the building. Based on I think we have a cost in the region of about $710 a square foot versus $206 a square foot for the multi-purpose space. So the penal grade fixtures and that type of durable component has got a cost premium associated with it.
So comparing a structure like this to a house isn't really apples to apples?
No.
So, okay. Thank you. I'm endorsing the plan. So, thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up question, and I forgot to mention it earlier. We've had, today we've talked about a couple of parks, and we've also sort of looked at our arts and culture and heritage study, and all of them have sort of encouraged that we want to have community use in our parks. So I'm thinking about power. I'm thinking back to this February when we were down at Mackin Park for Festival du Bois, and there's power plugs on the outsides of buildings, but quite often it means running extension cords through across walkways that traditionally go around the building. And I'm just wondering, when we do this, if we can design it in such a way that we have power, maybe if, either in a lockbox or somehow, so that there's a way of getting power out into areas around the park that community groups may be using, but without actually having to put a plug in the wall and tape it down across the cement. And I'm just wondering if we can look at doing some access to power.
Through the chair, that's actually something that we'll be discussing at our very next meeting with the consultant group. We've looked at there's kind of a variety of things. There's creating for event uses, and also maybe for connection of things such as temporary bathrooms and things like that, which require non-GFI protected outlets, and we'll be providing access directly into the electrical room for that. So there'll be opportunity to place cables at high level and things, and use the existing kiosks.
Perfect, because as we move to trying to make our parks more areas for festivals and community use and going beyond necessarily sports uses, I think that having access to power, water, in some cases additional sewer hookups, and these are all things that are much cheaper to do when we're building the building. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved, seconded, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Next item, item 18, pertains to a temporary parking lot at Burlington Drive and other matters related to Glen Pavilion access. Staff recommendations that Council authorize staff to proceed with the construction of a temporary asphalt parking lot at 1198 Pine Tree Way, together with other improvements as outlined in the report. And 2, share the proposed action plan outlined in the report with the Glen Pine 50+ Society in order to ensure that they are aware that the city is working to address their concerns.
Questions? Councillor Asmussen.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad to see this is going to get some temporary solution to this. I think the idea that it has to be paved, I think the idea of having a tag for the Glen Pine people and pay parking for other people but I think there's some details that still need to be worked out and fleshed out. The only other question that I have is for staff and planning. So this is a temporary parking solution. What are we going to do and start to look towards a long-term parking solution for this area?
Your Worship, through the Chair, you are correct. This is a temporary solution. The land that this temporary solution sits on is a developable piece of property that is worth a lot of money today, and it'll be worth more in the future. We're looking at the entire precinct in the future. We're looking at Spirit Square. We're looking at Buchanan Square. We have another property to the west of the RCMP building, and we need to look at the entire precinct in one cohesive manner. And we're not ready to do that at this time, so this is a good opportunity to have a temporary use on there until we are prepared, in conjunction with Council, to look at the bigger picture in the precinct and determine exactly where that parking will be, how and where that parking will be replaced in the future. Because the city is in a fortunate position to own land in the area, we are in a much better position to have flexibility in determining that in the future. However, we're unable to provide Council and the public with the solution today, so this is a temporary interim solution to enable us to provide Council and the public with a more permanent solution in the future.
No, I'm very supportive of this moving through. I think it's a good temporary solution. It's been raised before, and I think it's a good access point. I just wanted to highlight the need, because the parking in the area for Glen Pine, and the people that use Glen Pine, are going to want closer access into the Glen Pine Pavilion and not further away from it. But it also speaks to there's issues just not for Glen Pine, but in that area altogether in the parking. So I'll leave that for you for future reports. I just didn't want to have that missed in this area, because I think it's important to people up there to understand what the future does hold, because they may be satisfied in the interim, but they would like to know what's going to be the long-term solution. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, that was basically my question. I was happy with the answer, because I do think that we do have to look for long-term solutions in this area. It's unfortunate that that Spirit Square, of course, sits on dirt. It would have been really great if years ago we had put an underground parking lot under there, because there's definitely a shortage of parking now with SkyTrain coming, and with this area developing, it's only going to get worse. So this is a great solution, but it's, as you said, it's temporary, and I'm looking forward to seeing what staff comes up with for some long-term solutions. Thank you.
Mr. Diosecki.
Thank you. I just want to mention to bring it to Council's attention that our engineering transportation planning division has been working on a citywide evergreen line corridor transportation study. We've been working on it for about 2 months now. It's obviously a large study, and one of the principal goals of this study is to address your question. And so I'm certain that before the end of this year, we will have a strategy presented to Council, and we'll have discussions, and so we'll have a solid document to move forward.
Well, thank you very much. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and the additional step in the second recommendation to let the Glen Pine 50-plus Society know exactly what's going on. And I think I've got to stop by and get a membership card now. But I think it's really important that we take that out of piece. So we are referring to this as temporary, and I think anytime somebody hears the word temporary, they say, well, for how long? So could you shed some light on the timeline for the completion of the city center OCP component, the updates, and...
Through your worship, Mr. McIntyre may be able to fill you in with more of the details about the city center neighborhood plan update. However, we're not really hinging this on the neighborhood plan today. When that plan is completed in the future, there may be some opportunities that arise after the completion of the Evergreen line. There may be opportunities that arise. We have to look at it in conjunction with the assets we own in the precinct. For example, Spirit Square was only built 5 years ago. It may not make sense even 5 years from now to start digging up Spirit Square because its economic life hasn't come to the end yet, or it may, depending how much the land value has gone up. I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, so it would be unfair for me to say to the 50-plus society that this is interim for 1 year, 5 years, 7 years. I would be misleading them. It's really going to be opportunity driven in conjunction with how this city center evolves with the Evergreen line. I mean, there's a huge change happening, and I don't think any of us, we're prepared, but I don't think any of us really know what that impact of that Evergreen line is going to have on the city center.
Okay, well, you know, I appreciate that, and wouldn't believe for a moment you could give a commitment that it's, 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. But what I would ask is that the added communication piece that we're putting into this recommendation is that we continue that level of communication with the society going forward as opportunities present themselves. Last point I want to make, and I want to reiterate that Councillor Asmundson touched on this, parking. This is parking for the utilization of this facility first and foremost. It is very close to the terminus of the SkyTrain. I want to ensure that individuals do not see this as an opportunity for a park and ride, and that you take the necessary steps to ensure that the limits are in place, that we're not going to find our seniors having to, or our 50-plus, I don't want to call them seniors, especially now. We certainly don't want to see them having to walk extended distances because people are using it as a park and ride. Okay? Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, and the other part of this report that has escaped mention so far is the temporary drop-off short-term parking area, which I think is equally important to the folks at Glen Pine, to have a drop-off area that's close to them and it's not dangerous and gets them out of the Glen Pine alleyway that's on the other side as well. And I would suggest that even though this particular feature is described as a temporary drop-off, short-term, the drop-off is temporary, that I would think that regardless of what happens in the future, there is always going to be some sort of drop-off there, at the very least. And I'm pretty sure that even though this parking lot is a temporary parking lot, there's going to be a permanent solution to this problem. And that I'd be very surprised to see these temporary measures end and then there be nothing. So even though these are temporary, this is the start. This is the solution for now, and the solution, the permanent solution will come later. But we've solved a big part of the problem now, and I don't think the people at Glen Pine have to worry anymore. Certainly we could always use more parking, but this is going a long way. It effectively doubles the amount of parking, just about, and the drop-off is important too. So you're always going to have extra parking. You're always going to have a drop-off.
Thank you. Councillor Cirillo.
Mine is just a quick comment. I don't see Mr. Radnage in the office or in the audience tonight, but I just wanted to say thank you so much on the compromise on bullet number 3, which is the stamped concrete only in a certain portion of the walkway. So, Perry, I'm not sure who came up with that, but just wonderful compromise there to keep the consistency of the look, but keep it safe for those that need it.
Did you want a reply from someone? Councillor Cirillo? No? Oh, okay. It's been moved, seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Last item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our last item is the on-table item, which we've referred to as item 19. This pertains to the rescheduling of the 2016 55-plus BC Games. New report is before you. Staff recommendations that Council endorse the rescheduling of the 2016 BC 55-plus Games from August 23rd to 27th to September 20th to 24th in order to address the overlap and anticipated conflict with the 2016 America's Master Games in Vancouver, which is taking place August 24th to 27th to September 4th. Secondly, the staff be directed to work with the BC Senior Games Society, the BC Games Office, and the Coquitlam Host Society to adjust the 55-plus games as necessary in relation to the new dates.
Second.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. I'm going to support this report. And I want to just spend just a very quick moment to thank everybody who worked so hard on this. This has been a very big project for our staff, and I know that there was a big obstacle when we discovered that the America's Masters Games, when they announced their timing a couple of months ago, it was a big shock to all of us, and but more importantly, it was a big task that all of a sudden staff had to deal with that they didn't know they'd have to deal with. And they've been working very hard to come up with this, and working with the BC Senior Games Society, the BC Games Office. I also want to thank the Coquitlam Host Society, the board of directors that have come together. Most of that board is now in place, and they've been essentially in limbo for a month and a half or so, waiting for this to be concluded. And I want to thank them for volunteering in the first place to serve on this board, and thank them for their patience until we came up with this solution. And so those needed to get that out there, because this has not been easy on anybody, but I think finally we are going to be in a position where everybody can enjoy a very successful BC 55-plus games here in Coquitlam, and also I hope that Vancouver has a very successful 2016 America's Masters Games. There is always the possibility that people from all around British Columbia will say, no, we just want to come to Coquitlam's games. So they're very, so Vancouver, I wish them good luck. They're going to be competing against a very high-powered team here in Coquitlam, and I think we're going to have a very successful games.
Councillor Hodge.
Well, this came up at our Sports Council meeting last week, or 2 weeks ago, and certainly there were concerns about the ability to host the two games at the same time in the same geographical area. We were very excited. All of Coquitlam and certainly Council were really pleased when we were awarded the games for 2016. It's our 125th birthday. It's one of the premier events that we're going to host during that celebration. So I am pleased that staff has been able to work with the Game Society to come up with a solution that's going to, I think, allow both games to be successful. And as Councillor Neal said, I think that's what the ultimate goal is. That it's good for sports, it's good for the participants and for the spectators. And I certainly hope that the America's Masters Games are a success, because I know ours will be. It does create some challenges moving it to a different time. I'm hoping that that people will see this as an opportunity to come down and enjoy Coquitlam in September. And also, I know that we're going to have to do some work with some of our partners, including the schools, because gymnasiums will be in use. But I think that this is going to be an opportunity for students in those schools to maybe they do give up some gym space for a day or two, but I hope that they will then be able to come out and see first-class competition taking place, and to see that many of the sports that they're learning today in school are actually lifelong sports, and that they will have an opportunity to come and see some of our senior or our 55-plus athletes compete in those venues. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to find a solution, and I look forward to seeing the success of both games. Thank you.
Councillor Towner.
I also will be endorsing this proposal. I also want to take a couple minutes just to say that I'm very, very proud of our Coquitlam staff. Getting the news of the conflict really threw a wrench into how we were moving along, assembling the board and getting the volunteers together, and the creativity and the time that was spent in meetings and writing emails and dealing with the media and all that. I'm looking for solutions. I just want to reiterate that we as Coquitlam residents are very fortunate to have such a fantastic team of dedicated staff that always had win-win. We were looking for a solution so this could happen, and I'm really excited to be involved in hosting these games next year. I have all the confidence in the world that our games are going to be a success, a great event, and I hope you all look forward to next year when we welcome athletes from all over the province into our city. I also want to just take this opportunity to encourage everybody who won't be competing in the games next year to come on out, volunteer, be involved somehow, and encourage your friends and families who fit that age bracket to come on out and compete and celebrate sports, celebrate community, and add to what's shaping up to be a fantastic 125th birthday for us next year. So thank you.
Thank you. I too want to add my thanks to staff. This was quite a roller coaster you got upon because of the province, and we were all very concerned, but I have to tell you today when this came up, I think we're a pretty happy bunch around here. This is really exciting for us. And you know, looking at the weather, another thing, if August is any worse than it is in June, it's going to be so hot out there. And September in Coquitlam will just be like the balmy breezes off the Hawaiian shore. And so I assume everyone in British Columbia will be here. So thank you again, staff. This was wonderful news. It's been moved, seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, that's the last formal item on this agenda.
Gee, they're all anxious to leave. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now it's question period. Only good questions are allowed. And I knew Sandra Marston would have one. Good evening. Your name and address so we can find you.
Sandra Marsden, 3420 Highland Drive, Burke Mountain. I'm really glad to hear that parking is at the forefront because, for obvious reasons. But has there been any thought to requiring developers to put in a parking lane, particularly in the new development areas? I know that was an agreement that Polygon did with the neighbors on our street, and it's working really well, even though they haven't even started building. But my question is there any way in which, or has there been any thought to asking other developers throughout the city to give up a bit of their property when they develop to put in that parking lane just for visitors and for overflow of cars?
I'll put your question through to Mr. McIntyre, I think, because it is development.
Yes, Madam Chair. I have to admit I haven't been up in that area for a little while, and I should really do that. I seem to recall with the townhouse site or the duplex development site that is being referred to, there were some challenges with it. There were some slopes. I think it was a creek that crossed through there. I think the internal access road system was a little broken up, so I think there was concern at the time that development went through about ensuring enough parking and part of that, I believe, was dealt with, or it sounds like it was dealt with through parking bays along the roadway, and it sounds like that seems to be working. I'll have to check with staff just to see how that's worked, and that's whether it's a measure we seek with other projects. Typically, though, with these types of developments, there will be road widening dedication that's being requested, along with works along those roads to finish them off. And typically, for a multi-family site, there would be the ability for the road width to enable on-street parking along there. I know, though, from experience, when you provide that parking pocket, it sort of better defines that area, and it sort of tucks the parking away. So that's something we can take away. And just incidentally, Madam Chair, and I guess more broadly respond to the question, staff are following up on Council's repeated requests about looking at parking in the northeast. Joseph and I have had some discussions about that. Our staff, we're going to be getting together here in the very near future, so I'll take this away, too, as a point of discussion.
It also includes the southwest, the straight east, the straight west, the straight north, and the straight south. Parking anywhere in this city has to be looked at again. Thank you.
And just to bring you up to date, there is an adjacent single-family housing that is going up with garages RS7 and then without garages RS8, and they obviously have volunteered to put in a parking lane or parking width, extra width from their property as well on at least two sides of their development. So it's something that if you don't ask the developers, they might not volunteer, but certainly some people are open to it. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? If not, I'll say good evening and thank you for coming.